Hello again, my friends, and welcome to the Aquilani History Podcast, or shall I say, welcome back. So, welcome to those of you joining for the first time, and welcome back to my returning listeners. Just want to say thank you for being here with me, for your support. Thank you for subscribing, for your likes, for your comments, for all your ideas. I'm grateful for every input so far. So welcoming you to my home from wherever you are all over the world. Do let me know where you're listening from, whether it be from Cape Town to Cairo, Djibouti to Gambia, Lagos, London, Abidjan, Joburg, Bangalore, Gothenburg, or Kuala Lumpur. I've just rattled off some I've just rattled off places that have just popped into my head. Anyways, welcome to my home. Welcome to my podcast. This is the second episode of the series on the Sokoto Caliphate. We left off where we'd seen how the Caliphate is in a bit of a sticky situation, and Caliph Attahiru has to make some really tough decisions. At the moment, Sokoto is surrounded by three European powers, so Germany, France, but mainly the United Kingdom. Sokoto is isolated and is quite sticky. He's having to draw strength from the memories and the legacy of his forebears, especially Uthman Dan Fodio, the founder of the Sokoto Caliphate. So without much further ado, let's dive into the episode for today, which is the Sokoto Caliphate, History of Sokoto Caliphate, Rankadede, Episode 2, The Teacher and His King. Happy listening.
The 1800s were about to begin, and the air was heavy with expectation. By this time, the tolerant Sarkin Bawa had died, and Gobir was ruled by Nafata, who had begun to view the growing movement with increasing suspicion. He had good reasons to as well, as Dan Fodio's movement had assumed characteristics of a state within a state. His community was being guided by his many writings and edicts, and these were not always in line with Gobi's state's policies. Sarkin Nafata was very alarmed to hear that the Shehu had begun to encourage his followers to arm themselves, and the relationship began to sour very quickly. Nafata, in a bid to suppress the Shehu's powers and regain some form of control, reversed all the privileges granted to the Shehu by his predecessor. No longer could his followers preach freely, and all men who were not born Muslim were ordered to revert to the religion of their parents. Turbans and veils were banned. The situation had reached boiling point, and all eyes were on Uthman. Yunfa, the young student of the Shehu, succeeded Nafata as Sarkin soon after, and may have seemed for a while that a period of peace was about to ensue. This, unfortunately, could not be more wrong. It soon became apparent that there was no fondness between the pupil and his former teacher. The tension was at a head, and all that was needed was a spark. That spark came in the early 1800s. Due to the stifling restrictions placed on Dan Fodio's community, some of his followers left Degel to settle around Zamfara, outside the realm of Gobir. This included a certain Abdusalam. This displeased Sarkin Yunfa, who ordered their return. When his request was denied, Yunfa ordered an attack on them. Many were killed, and the rest led away as slaves. On the way back to Gobir, this raiding party passed by the town of Degel. For the Shehu and his followers, this was too much. They could not stomach seeing their brothers chained up on slaves and destined for the slave markets. Not unexpectedly, they ambushed the Gobi party and freed their comrades. The situation was escalating to dangerous levels, and Yunfa now directly threatened the Shehu. What Danfodio did next may have appeared ordinary or even cowardly, but was actually a stroke of genius. Rather than risk open war at a time he wasn't ready, he decided to emigrate with his followers to Gudu. This avoided a theological crisis that would have arisen by having to attack fellow Muslims, something he had preached against. More importantly, this flight directly mirrored the migration or hijrah of the Prophet Muhammad from Mecca to Medina in the early days of Islam. This similarity was not lost on people, and multitudes flocked to his banner. Shehu Uthman Danfodio was declared Amir al-Mu'minin, the commander of the faithful. The battle line had been drawn, and Yunfa promptly declared war. The opposing forces met for the first time at Sunswa. The Shehu and his forces were dealt a reality check with a crushing defeat. 2,000 were killed, reportedly including 200 men who knew the entire Quran by heart. The next speech battle occurred soon after at Tafkin Kwato. Outnumbered and with vastly inferior arms, things looked dire, and the flame of the new movement looked like they might be snuffed out. But faced with imminent destruction, the Shehu's followers, commanded by his son Muhammad Bello, demonstrated remarkable discipline. The archers never broke rank and constantly peppered the marauding Gobi cavalry to submission. This was a major turning point. Now, all the fence-sitters became convinced about the Shehu, and the steady stream of support he commanded now became a flood. In the same token, the kings and nobles of the great Hausa city-states were eyeing this peasant mob upending the status quo with unease. So, when Yunfa asked them for help, they gladly came to his aid to put down this rebellion. What had been a fairly contained civil war had quickly escalated into a major trans-Sahel conflict. Flag bearers and retainers under the name of the Shehu took the fight to all corners of Hausa land. The year was 1804. Birin Kebbi was taken in 1805, as well as the strategic base of Gwandu in the west. Katsina, Daura, Kano, Zaria and Nupe had fallen into the hands of Danfodio's supporters by 1807. The tables had completely turned in 1809. Al-Kalawa, the capital of Gobi, fell after a major pitched battle. Yunfa was killed, and his kingdom became incorporated as an emirate into the newly formed Caliphate. Al-Kalawa was now Sokoto, and Shehu Uthman Danfodio was now Khalifa, Sarkin Muslimi, Amir al-Mu'minin of the Sokoto Caliphate. The Caliphate would continue to see expansion over the following 30 years to the south and to the east. For the very first time in over 700 years, the great Hausa city-states were united under a single banner. There was peace, and with that stability came prosperity and a rise in learning, arts, music and culture. The Shehu, never really comfortable with absolute power, retired after 6 years, the new kingdom essentially being run by his son, Muhammad Bello from Sokoto, and his brother Abdullahi from Gwandu. He continued to write and teach, and throughout his life, he penned about 480 poems and many essays on varied subjects, and importantly, prophecies, till his death at age 61. Sokoto unfortunately did not become the shining religious utopia that Danfodio had envisioned, and he was on occasion very critical on the running of the nation he had founded. In turn, he was criticized by neighboring Muslim states whom he had invaded. El Kanemi of Borno famously engaged in debates with the Shehu via letters, calling Sokoto out on his hypocrisy for waging jihad on Kanem Borno, which is part of Dar es Islam, that is, the land of fellow believers. Most of his prominent retainers made significant personal gain, and some were rewarded with emirates of their own and allowed a great deal of autonomy. But jealousy and discontent were rife. For instance, the same Abdus-Salam whose flight to Zamfara and capture was the immediate trigger that settled the revolution, he became quite upset with what he saw as an unfairly small reward when gifts and lands were distributed. He rebelled and led an armed uprising which was eventually defeated and he was killed. Many of the practices Danfodio preached against never really changed. Unfair taxation, oppression of the masses by the ruling class, and slavery was rife. At its zenith, Sokoto had 2.5 million slaves. 1 in every 4 souls in the Caliphate was a slave. It would appear that old oppressive systems had just had a change of ropes. Future caliphs and emirs soon forgot about the founding principles their fathers had fought for. Some infighting would resume, most famous of which was the Kano Civil War of the late 1800s, where the caliph supported the losing faction. No revolution is perfect, and Sokoto perfectly exemplified this. But despite her many troubles, she remained the largest and strongest empire in Africa, south of the Sahara. But Sokoto was not the only empire with expansion in its plans. It has been well said that nature abhors vacuum. What is not often said is that nature also abhors imbalance. An imbalance in power must cause a shift, and the direction of this shift is always dictated by the stronger power. Attahiru had been silent, lost in deep thought, while his advisors debated on what to do next. He raised his head, and the entire assembly falls into a hush. He speaks. The enemy is upon our threshold. Once he came as a humble friend seeking trade, but he has become too comfortable, taking liberties after accepting our hospitality. He insults our institutions and interferes with our laws. He dares instruct us on how to look after our own people. He imposes protection where we have not asked, as if it isn't clear that the only enemies here are him and his friends. I received a letter from the emissary, Lugard, and in it he boasts of defeating and removing our emirs in Kotangora and Bida, and demand we select new ones. But he went on ahead to appoint candidates of his choice anyways. He tells us that whatever conflict may have arisen between our realm and his has nothing to do with religion, but he has, in the same breath, without any subtlety, kindly reminded us that even though his government is willing to cooperate with us, British soldiers have already established British rule over Muslim lands all over the world. His intent now is very clear, as the armies of 3 European nations surround us. If we plan to migrate, there is now neither time nor routes for that. This is my response. Tell the infidel that we did not invite him to interfere with our problems. He has his religion, and we have ours. And as my predecessor, Caliph Abdurrahman, said, the only relationship that can exist between a believer and an infidel is war.
And right, that is the end of the second episode of the History of Sokoto Caliphate series, episode 2. I've left it as a bit of a cliffhanger. The air is thick with expectation. I do hope you come back for the third episode, which I hope to release pretty soon. It's going to be the 100-year day, which is part 3 and concluding episode in this series on the history of the Sokoto Caliphate. And you might be able to tell that it's going to be packed with lots of action. It's going to be packed with lots of history. It's going to be full on thick, I do hope you join me. And as always, I welcome any suggestions, comments. I welcome your support. I'm doing everything by myself, recording, editing, researching. So every little bit helps, every little click to like, to share, to tell your friends about it. It's just really helpful, and I appreciate all of it. So thank you very much, and be well, everyone, and see you soon.